There's a strange silence that creeps in when the screen goes black. No buzz, no flicker, no laugh track cushioning your thoughts. Just you, and something inside you recoils. Why does that silence feel so loud? You reach for your phone instinctively. Maybe there's a notification, a reel, a trailer, a distraction, anything but this suffocating awareness of self. In those few seconds between dopamine hits, you're forced to confront a reality that entertainment has carefully kept hidden. You don't know what to do with your own mind anymore. And here's the paradox: never in human history have we had more access to joy, color, music, stories, spectacle. But never have we been more bored, anxious, and detached. You have millions of songs, videos, and games at your fingertips, yet your soul feels starved. What if the problem isn't that entertainment is too powerful, but that you've forgotten how to exist without it? This isn't just about movies or TikTok or binging shows at 2 a.m. This is about a psychological shift, a rewiring of your attention, your identity, your very sense of reality. You live in an age where boredom feels like failure, where silence feels like threat, where presence feels unbearable. But think for a moment. What is entertainment when it becomes the lens through which you see the world? When it becomes the only way you feel anything? What happens to a society when every dull moment must be filled, every thought pre-chewed, every emotion choreographed? And what do we become when we're no longer participants in our lives, but passive consumers of someone else's imagination? Could it be that this addiction isn't just a side effect of progress, but a symptom of something deeper, a spiritual hunger, a collective fear, a loss of something essential? You felt it in that hollow scroll, in the pause between episodes, in the dread of a quiet morning with no plans, no noise. That flicker of panic isn't boredom, it's the echo of an inner life slowly disappearing. So here's the question that most never dare to ask. What if entertainment is not enhancing your life, but slowly devouring it? What if the screens, the spectacles, the endless stream of novelty are just digital morphine for a generation quietly dying of meaninglessness? And if that's true, how do you wake up? How do you unplug from a system that knows exactly how to keep you comfortable, numb, and quietly compliant? The answer doesn't lie in demonizing entertainment. It lies in understanding what we've traded for it. And in the next section, we're going to peel back the curtain to expose the hidden psychological and philosophical machinery behind this addiction. You'll see it not as a personal weakness, but as a powerful force meticulously engineered and unconsciously embraced. Because the truth isn't just uncomfortable, it's terrifying. At the root of this addiction is not laziness, nor indulgence, nor some generational moral failing. The real problem is far more insidious, hidden in plain sight, woven into the very psychology of what it means to be human in a hyperstimulated world. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul." That's what entertainment has become, a beautiful, blinking barrier between you and yourself. It begins with discomfort, a moment of stillness, a quiet evening, and an occupied mind. In that space, something ancient awakens, an unease that modern life has taught you to drown, not confront. You reach for the screen, not because you're truly interested in what's on it, but because it rescues you from your own thoughts. But where did that discomfort come from? To understand, you have to step back. Enter Arthur Schopenhauer, who believed that the essence of human suffering is the endless striving of the will, the constant reaching for something just beyond grasp. Entertainment then becomes not a luxury, but an escape hatch, a temporary suspension of that endless wanting, a momentary illusion that the ache inside has been satisfied. But here's the trick: it doesn't satisfy, it numbs. You watch, scroll, click, consume, and for a moment, the hunger fades, but it always returns stronger, louder, so you go back for more. The screen becomes the syringe, the dopamine hit, the fix, and you don't even realize it's happening, because society tells you this is normal. Aldous Huxley foresaw this in Brave New World. He warned not of oppression by fear, but sedation by pleasure, a world where people are not beaten into submission, but lulled into passivity through a constant stream of superficial stimulation. In Huxley's dystopia, people weren't controlled by pain, they were controlled by entertainment. You live in that world now. Philosophically, the problem runs even deeper. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote of the last man, a creature of comfort, security, and numbing routine. This last man no longer strives for greatness or truth. He just wants to be entertained, to be left alone to avoid suffering. And so he becomes hollow, apathetic, disconnected, void of meaning. Is this not the spiritual profile of our age? Entertainment addiction is not just a habit. It is the psychological architecture of the last man. And it's built on a lie. That distraction is better than death. That passive stimulation is safer than active living. That comfort is worth more than purpose. And like any lie, it requires reinforcement. That's where the algorithms come in. The infinite scroll, the autoplay, the endless buffet of pixels engineered to keep you from ever returning to yourself. Neuroscience tells us that every flicker of novelty triggers a reward circuit. It's the same circuit involved in drugs, gambling, and compulsive behaviors. But here's the cruel twist. The reward is shallow, fleeting, a spark, not a fire. It keeps you hooked but never fulfilled. And what does this do to your mind? It fragments it. You lose your capacity for deep thought, for patience, for boredom, which is the birthplace of creativity. You forget how to be alone, how to feel fully present, how to wrestle with discomfort until it teaches you something. But perhaps worst of all, you lose your hunger for meaning. You trade the difficult questions, who am I? What matters? Why am I here? For curated content that pretends to answer them, but only feeds the surface. Sartre warned that when we outsource our inner life to others, we live in bad faith, denying our freedom, avoiding our responsibility to choose meaning rather than consume it. This is the hidden cost of constant entertainment. A life that is easy, but empty. A self that is busy, but hollow. And so the question shifts. Is this truly addiction? Or is it something darker? A silent surrender? A culturally sanctioned escape from the unbearable task of being fully alive? In the name of entertainment, we have anesthetized the soul, but here's the part no one talks about. The longer you stay in that numbness, the more terrified you become of waking up. You don't just fear silence, you start to fear yourself. The trap is deep, but it is not inevitable, because the same mechanisms that bind you to this cycle can be repurposed to free you. But first, you have to see how this addiction plays out, not in theory, but in the real, tangible destruction it wreaks on your mind, your relationships, and your culture. That's what we explore next. At first, it doesn't feel like destruction. It feels like fun, like freedom, like finally getting a break after the unbearable weight of modern life presses down on your shoulders. What harm could there be in relaxing with a few episodes? A scroll through TikTok, a video game binge to pass the time. But destruction rarely enters with a screen. It comes silently, it smiles, it makes itself comfortable, and before long it redefines what you think of as normal. The unseen consequence of entertainment addiction is that it doesn't destroy your life all at once, it erodes it, piece by piece, and you barely notice it's happening. Your attention span fragments. You can no longer sit still with a book. Your mind flits from tab to tab, clip to clip, craving novelty like a starving animal. You lose presence. Conversations become shallow. Eye contact becomes rare. Silence becomes unbearable. The moment your surroundings quiet down, you reflexively reach for your phone, not because anything important awaits, but because discomfort does. And then your relationships. We think of addiction as something solitary, something shamefully tucked away in a corner. But entertainment addiction has gone public. It's communal. It's everywhere. Entire families sitting in the same room, each behind their private screen. Couples lying in bed, physically near but mentally worlds apart. Children raised by iPads. Friends hanging out by staring silently into parallel digital voids. No one is fully here. No one is fully gone. We float in a zombified limbo, each of us feeding from the same algorithmic trough, convinced we're living while something vital within us slowly withers. This isn't just emotional decay, it's neurological. Psychologists and neuroscientists have identified what's called the default mode network in the brain, a region activated when the mind is at rest, not focused on external tasks. This network is where deep introspection, creativity, and memory consolidation happen. But here's the terrifying part. Constant stimulation suppresses this network. So the more entertained you are, the less you reflect, the less you remember, the less you create. You are fed images, sounds, and stories, but you lose the thread of your own. And then comes the deeper cost: identity collapse. When you are constantly absorbing other people's thoughts, stories, and curated versions of life, you slowly stop developing your own. The voice in your head weakens. Your values blur. Your desires aren't born from within, they're suggested, implanted, and reinforced by whatever content you consume most. You begin to live reactively, not reflectively. Ask yourself, when was the last time you sat alone in silence for more than a few minutes without reaching for a distraction? When was the last time you were bored and let it teach you something? When was the last time you created something instead of consumed? These questions point to the soul's erosion, but society rewards the erosion. It normalizes it. Schools hand out tablets like pacifiers. Workplaces encourage microdopamine breaks disguised as refreshers. Cities erect massive screens on sidewalks to make sure you're never alone with a thought. Even rest has become branded Netflix and chill, doom scrolling. Just one more episode, and then culture itself begins to reflect the addiction. Art becomes faster, louder, shallower. News is reduced to headlines and hot takes. Politics becomes performance. Religion becomes entertainment. Truth becomes whatever's trending. The individual soul's numbing stales into collective consciousness. A society that can't sit in silence becomes a society that can't think critically. And a society that can't think critically becomes one that can't recognize its own chains. We become dependent not just on distraction, but on emotional outsourcing. If we're sad, we watch a feel-good video. If we're angry, we rage tweet. If we're anxious, we binge. But in this process, we lose the capacity to sit with emotion, to process grief, to struggle with doubt, to search for truth beyond the algorithm's curated bubble. And that's the most dangerous part, because if you cannot sit with yourself, you cannot know yourself. And if you do not know yourself, you can be made into anything. Entertainment addiction does not just destroy attention, it destroys sovereignty. It trains you to outsource your choices, your emotions, your beliefs, not through force, but through the slow hypnosis of habit. So where does this end? It ends in the terrifying realization that comfort has become the enemy of growth, that we are amusing ourselves to spiritual death, that freedom has been exchanged for stimulation, and meaning for momentary relief. But not all is lost, because the very mechanisms that have entrapped you, the need for stimulation, the hunger for escape, can be flipped, can be transmuted. If you're willing to rebel, if you're willing to wake up, that's where we go next. You already feel it, don't you? The tension building beneath the surface, a quiet war inside your chest. Part of you wants to reach for the screen, again, to escape the discomfort of awareness. But another part, the deeper part, has begun to stir. It whispers, "This isn't who you are." And that's where the rebellion begins. Not with a scream or some grand declaration, but with a whisper, with a decision, not to consume, to confront. Because here's the truth: breaking free from entertainment addiction is not about deleting your apps or throwing your phone into the ocean. It's about reclaiming your inner world. It's about becoming conscious where you've been unconscious. And that is a radical act in an age that profits from your passivity. You see, the system isn't just designed to entertain you, it's designed to keep you numb. Think of the countless engineers, psychologists, and behavioral economists working tirelessly to hack your dopamine pathways. Your entertainment addiction isn't the failure of willpower. It's the outcome of a billion-dollar industry designed to exploit your attention, your boredom, your loneliness. So the first rebellion is awareness. You must learn to observe your cravings like a scientist studying fire. Watch how quickly your hand moves to unlock your phone when you're anxious. Notice how you scroll not because you want to, but because the silence feels unbearable. Track it, name it. Don't judge it, but don't obey it either. This is how you begin to reclaim your agency. The second rebellion is resistance. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Entertainment addiction thrives in the shadows. It lives in the places you haven't explored inside yourself, your fears, your regrets, your grief. To resist, you must face them. Instead of running from discomfort, sit with it. Instead of drowning it in noise, let it speak. What is your boredom trying to tell you? What is your sadness begging you to acknowledge? What dream did you abandon in exchange for 1,000 hours of passive consumption? Make space for those questions. Let the stillness crack open the hollowed-out places in your soul. And then create. That is the third rebellion. Not consume, create. Build something, write, paint, design, cook, garden, speak, move your body. Reconnect with something ancient inside you that doesn't need a screen to feel alive. Every moment you choose to create over consume, you disrupt the cycle. You teach your nervous system that aliveness doesn't come from outside, it rises from within. This is not easy. You will feel withdrawal. You will feel phantom urges to escape. You will feel like you're losing your lifeline to the world. But it's not a lifeline. It's a leash. And you were never meant to live tethered to a feed. You were meant to feel the wind on your face, to listen to your own thoughts, to have ideas that weren't algorithmically suggested, to feel time pass not as something to kill but as something sacred. Sartre spoke of bad faith, the tendency to lie to oneself in order to avoid the anguish of freedom. In this digital age, bad faith is binge-watching your freedom away, episode after episode, swipe after swipe, while convincing yourself that it's harmless. But once you recognize the lie, the anguish comes. And from that anguish, freedom. Real rebellion is not flashy. It's not some aesthetic minimalism trend on Instagram. It's messy. It's lonely at first. You'll relapse. You'll feel weird when you're the only one not watching the latest show. You'll sit in silence and feel like your skin is crawling. But stay there. Stay with it. That discomfort is detox. It means your inner world is waking up again. And here's the most beautiful part of the rebellion. It reconnects you with other rebels. Once you step outside the noise, you begin to find others who've escaped the trance. You find deeper conversations. You find friends who ask real questions. You find time not just for productivity, but for peace, for wonder, for presence. And most of all, you find yourself. Not the version you curated online. Not the person shaped by trends and timelines. The real you. The one who remembers what it feels like to be fully alive, even in stillness, especially in stillness. So the question is no longer, how do I quit entertainment? The real question is, what kind of life do I want to live? One curated for comfort, or one carved through consciousness? Because the screen will always be there, ready to seduce you back into numbness. But so will the path of the rebel, and only one leads you home. At last, the silence. No more pings. No more neon-lit feeds scrolling endlessly like conveyor belts through your soul. You sit there, just you, your breath, your thoughts, and for a moment, it feels foreign, almost unbearable. But then, something begins to shift. It's not peace, not yet. It's more primal, a kind of remembering, a flicker of something buried beneath the digital noise and emotional anesthesia. And then it hits you. You've been hiding, not just from boredom or discomfort, but from your life, from the immensity of what it means to be human. You didn't just lose time to entertainment, you lost yourself. This is the final truth, the ultimate revelation. We aren't addicted to entertainment because we crave joy. We are addicted because We fear consciousness. You weren't binge-watching for fun. You were binge-watching to forget. Forget the dreams that died before they ever lived. Forget the relationships that never healed. Forget the ache of existence. Forget the weight of having to be someone in a world that constantly tells you you're not enough. And entertainment, it was the perfect drug, a cocktail of dopamine and denial, because deep down you sensed something terrifying. If you stopped consuming, even for a moment, you'd have to face the void, and in that void, you feared was nothing. But here's the final paradox. It's not nothing. The void is where you are, your real self, untouched by algorithmic manipulation, and that by digital performance is not a fantasy. It's simply been buried under 1,000 distractions. You feared the void, but the void was your womb. You feared silence, but silence was your sanctuary. You feared boredom, but boredom was the birthplace of insight. The more you ran from your inner world, the more you felt hollow, not because there was nothing inside, but because you were never still long enough to find it. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." Entertainment, by its nature, strips us of that why. It replaces meaning with mimicry. It gives us avatars instead of identities, stories instead of truths, and constant stimulation instead of deep transformation. The final, painful truth: entertainment addiction isn't just a problem, it's a symptom of a world too afraid to feel, too afraid to slow down, too afraid to suffer deeply enough to heal. But once you see this, truly see it, you can't go back. Not because someone told you to quit, not because you read a productivity blog, but because you've tasted something deeper, yourself. You've seen what it's like to sit with the rawness of being human. You've felt the tremor of emotion return to your body. You've rediscovered the strange miracle of thought, memory, attention. And in that rediscovery, you've stumbled upon something sacred: the power to choose. To choose presence over passive scrolling. To choose stillness over stimulation. To choose purpose over programming. And it doesn't mean you'll never watch another film or scroll through another meme. But now you're no longer a pawn. You're not reaching blindly, compulsively, desperately. You're awake. You've looked into the mirror of your own behavior, and instead of recording, you remained. And from that place, you can build a life that isn't dictated by algorithms, but animated by intention. A day that isn't hijacked by dopamine, but held together by discipline. A mind that isn't fractured by feeds, but formed through solitude and soul work. You become the rarest thing in the 21st century. A free mind. Not because you live in a cabin in the woods. Not because you broke your phone, but because you remembered how to be alone with yourself without fleeing. You remembered how to feel pain without numbing, how to embrace boredom without fear, how to inhabit your own body without shame, how to think without permission. And if you remember nothing else from this journey, remember this: your aliveness is not entertainment. Your purpose is not likes. Your joy is not trending. The screen can only simulate what your soul was designed to live. And when you unplug, truly unplug, you don't become less connected. You become connected to something infinitely more important: reality. So here you are, awake, aware, alive. And the question now is no longer, will I go back? The question is, what will I create now that I'm free?